The fact that the MCU is taking over the filming industry is no news to us, but Quentin Tarantino seems to think that DC and Marvel movies are the beginning of the end when it comes to movie content. Here's why Tarantino says filmmakers today are waiting for superhero movies to fail. While we're at it, let's also look at Quentin Tarantino's 6 perfect movies and the 2 he walked out of. First up, those movies just aren't it when it comes to Tarantino. Over the last few years, DC and Marvel have released a huge amount of content, especially when it comes to movies and TV shows. They've also practically dominated the box office. While a lot of us are into the superhero genre and have been since we were kids, some people just think these types of movies are bringing the film industry down, and Tarantino is one of them. Not only does he not approve of them, but he also says that filmmakers of today are just waiting for them to go away. When Tarantino talked to the Los Angeles Times about his new book, Cinema Speculation, he said that he's desperately waiting for the day when people lose interest in these types of movies, and he seems pretty convinced that this genre is temporary because it isn't really good. He also said that it's got a chokehold on him. What's more, Tarantino has also compared superhero movies to musical adaptations from the 1960s. Apparently, the movie directors were happy when audiences stopped going to see them. Back in 1969, they hated these movies so much that they would regret spending their money, saying that they wasted time watching something nobody cared about. He went on to say that it's not quite written on the wall yet. That said, he admitted people today aren't at that point right now, but it's coming for sure. Coming up, why Marvel movies are similar to musicals back in the day. When Tarantino made that comment about Marvel movies not being good cinema, there was obviously a ton of backlash. He was criticized for judging the genre from a very narrow lens. But the thing is, it's not really a bad idea to compare superhero movies from the 2010s and 2020s to musicals from the 1960s. Many people, including Steven Spielberg, have said that westerns and superhero movies are similar because they both have mythologized images of a hero in a white hat or cape doing right by force. Even then, the musical might be a better comparison. Basically, when sound came to movies, that genre was the very first one. It was most popular in the 1950s after World War II when MGM's Arthur Freed unit was in charge of that genre. It was like Marvel Studios of its time. In the end, the western just went away because there were too many westerns on film and TV. On the other hand, the musical was more of a Hollywood product because of the budget and production value needed to make a traditional popular musical. What's more, he would never consider working at MCU. Quentin has a very strong opinion about the people who work at MCU. He gave some pretty constructive comments when he was asked whether he would even consider working in the MCU. According to him, he'd have to be super desperate and actively looking for a job. If he started working in that industry, yikes, that's harsh. He even went as far as saying that the people who are already working there are sort of like hired hands. This branding doesn't really show that they are creative artists who love making movies as an art form. He also said that he doesn't have time to play such a part. We can sort of understand where Tarantino is coming from since he's a director who did very well when the studio system fell apart. Even though the style of the 1970s is often associated with grindhouse and counterculture, it's clear that it's one of Tarantino's biggest influences. But to be honest, it also seems like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was a love letter to the last days of the old system and the hired hands who were happy to play small parts on Western TV shows. Following up, is the backlash justified? Considering there's a huge Marvel fandom out there, the backlash was expected, but this time it came in like a storm. Having said that, we're sure that the comments weren't actually meant to be mean. Since superhero movies became the most popular in the last 10 years, Marvel Studios has perfected the model of finding young, hungry filmmakers with little experience in the indie world or on TV. They've also gotten pretty good at putting them to work to make a vision that already has a house style. Still, if you don't already know, Tarantino actually thought about making a Luke Cage movie in the 1990s. The LA Times has also reported that he still has racks of comic books all over his Los Angeles home, along with his many film prints, CDs, vinyl records, and even VHS videos. Lastly, will the MCU actually collapse? Not gonna lie, the director does bring up an interesting point. The question is, could superhero movies actually fall apart as musicals did? If we're looking at it right now, it seems unlikely. First of all, studios are so deeply rooted in larger media conglomerates that it's hard to imagine one or even a few high-profile flops bringing down a studio. Also, if you think about the musical analogy logically, we're closer to the late 1950s or early 1960s than to the end of that decade. The success of movies like Avengers, Endgame, and Spider-Man No Way Home in the last few years shows that superhero movies are still going strong, just like My Fair Lady and The Sound of Music. And the MCU has an entire fan base that is feeding its need to provide more content. So it's amazing that in just 5 years, musicals went from being the most popular thing in the world to being as dead as Jacob Marley. And now, let's look at Quentin Tarantino's 6 perfect movies and 2 he walked out of. First up, Tarantino is also a big movie geek. We know he's a genius when it comes to directing movies, but this guy isn't just interested in just that. He also knows a lot about movies and how to talk about them. Basically, he doesn't just make pop culture, Tarantino lives it. Even his origin story is super cool. He worked at a video store for 5 years and watched movies when he was too young to do so, and then, just when he was 14, he wrote his first movie script. So yeah, obviously when a man like that talks about his 6 most favorite movies, you pay attention. What he thinks is that there aren't many perfect films that just complain about how hard it is to make movies. When someone's talking about perfect movies, they're also talking about a person's taste. But not gonna lie, there are definitely some movies that are simply just the best, even if you do consider all taste. Up next, he's a man of the 70s and 80s. When he was talking about having a very few perfect movies on his list, he mentioned the 1974 slasher classic Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Along with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there were movies like The Exorcist, Annie Hall, and Young Frankenstein, which was a comedy by Mel Brooks. The Wild Bunch was coming in at number 7, but then he later took it back, saying this one wasn't entirely perfect, though he did say the movie's flaws were part of its glory. You may have noticed that Tarantino's list is made up of 5 movies from the mid-1970s and 1 from 1985. This may be because those movies came out when he was young and developed his love for movies. Keep in mind that he was born in 1963. It seems like Tarantino likes movies with a lot of blood and guts, but that was already clear from the way he makes his own movies. Back to the Future was also on his list. It's a strange movie when you think about how much Marty McFly's mother liked her own son, but if you try to forget about that, it's a really fun time travel movie. Finally, the movies he couldn't sit through. We're really interested to know what comes in Tarantino's bad books when it comes to movies, and it seems like Marvel isn't on it. One of those movies was Bambi. This movie may be a super emotional, nostalgic movie for a lot of us. Quentin, though, just had a different point of view. He says that he left after Bambi's mother was shot and the forest burned down. Apparently, it's genuinely bad for kids, and that's not just a worn-out saying. The second movie in this category is Last House on the Left by Wes Craven. Even though Tarantino is known for putting a lot of violence in his movies, even the revenge thriller from 1972 was too much for him. In an interview, he got pretty riled up when he said that Bambi and Last House on the Left were, for sure, sitting right next to each other when it comes to traumatizing content. They are both similar because they're both set in the woods, and both of them make Quentin feel like he absolutely had to escape. On that note, that's a wrap for this video, my friends. What's your favorite movie directed by him? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.